Hello, I'm Don Mooers, and I want to welcome you to Montgomery Week in Review. A recent Supreme Court decision is likely to cost Montgomery County lots and lots of money into the future. Jane DeWinter, who comments on this program on a regular basis, is here to explain. Summer is a great season, but it's also the season for increased home burglaries as people leave their windows open and they're also out traveling on vacations. Henry Hailstock has some ideas that will help us safeguard ourselves in our homes. The June issue of The Beacon, one of our great periodicals here at Publications, is filled as usual with stories about health, travel, and other issues of great importance to all of us. Stuart Rosenthal, editor and publisher of The Beacon, is here to fill us in. Our summer vacations may be putting many children in a position of losing their academic learning for many children who are least able to be able to do this, who are in the position they're going to lose the most ground, unfortunately. Shirley Brandman is here to share some of the research being done in this very important area. Jane DeWinter, it's great to have you back here.
Thank you.
So tell us what's going on. Supreme Court decision, Montgomery County losing funding. What's going on?
Well, there was a case that recently in May was decided by the Supreme Court. It's called the Wynn case, which is named after the couple who brought suit against the state of Maryland.
Okay.
And Maryland, the state had ruled in their favor, and the Supreme Court affirmed that decision. And so basically, if you have income that you've earned in another state, when you file your income taxes, if you've had to pay taxes to another state, you get to claim that what you've paid to another state as a credit on your Maryland state taxes.
So there's not double taxation.
Right. But for the local portion, which everybody knows when you write down what county you live in,
the
piggyback tax, you weren't allowed to offset what you'd paid to another state on the piggyback tax. So the Supreme Court has just ruled that is in fact, it's actually, they ruled it on the basis of the Commerce Clause, saying that unconstitutional, but because it made that people would be less likely to,
violated the Commerce Clause.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
So Maryland as a whole now could have to refund $200 million to individuals who had been paying that tax over the last 7 years. But Montgomery County is on the hook for the majority of that because we have the most number of people who have income from other states.
As you say this, it doesn't sound, it sounds like it's bad short term for Montgomery County. Why were people paying double taxes in the past? Is this something that...
Well, the justification was that if you live somewhere, you're getting services and local taxes are paying for services. And in fact, there's a lot of other states that do something similar, but the difference is that in those other states, the city or the county was directly collecting the taxes. So that question hasn't come up.
So there are other models of more local jurisdictions where they just collect the taxes themselves.
They just collect the taxes and they're not offset. You're not allowed to offset. But Maryland taxes go through, or piggyback tax is collected by the state. So, there's a potential for some future tests of whether now in those other states, whether that model
Although there's probably a very strong desire on the state's part to continue to be the entity that collects the taxes.
Right, in Maryland,
right.
Yes.
But do we see a constitutional amendment coming up where give the independent taxing authority to the counties?
No, I don't think that the rest of the country is going to do an amendment just
for us. I'm saying no constitutional amendment in Maryland.
Maryland,
is it important to
stop
get this?
That. Well, I don't think that we'll see it now because there hasn't been we don't know whether the Supreme Court would uphold, what's going on in other states, and that certainly wouldn't be in Maryland's interest to go forward now until maybe there was a test case from another state to see whether it'd be.
So how do taxpayers find out if this affects them?
Well, I think that they would have to read the paper because the state will not be automatically refunding this money. You will have had to kind of kept track of it. You're only allowed to go back 7 years, and you as a taxpayer will in fact have to file to request that money back. So I doubt.
So the obligation is that if somebody is eligible for this, if you have paid taxes to another jurisdiction and are eligible, it's on you to take whatever appropriate steps.
Exactly. And so
Peter Franchot, our comptroller, will not be going door to door saying,
no,
here, I'm here to
no,
help.
I don't think it's going to be like your name in the paper, like we owe you money.
But I think he did. He has a fund that he is going to be using to pay back some of these funds too, as well.
Right, the state is going to
that.
initially, the
Yeah.
state has been setting aside reserves, and so the state will initially cover the refunds that have to be paid, but the counties are going to have to pay the state back over the next 3 years. So Montgomery County will be paying its portion of the refunds, which is a significant portion, and then going forward, they're no longer going to be getting that revenue, you know, for future tax years, which they estimate could be about $40 million.
Which would be another situation for Montgomery County to say we got to cut and or tax, and which makes sense that next year the property taxes may be going up.
Well, there clearly is going to be an impact, and obviously, I think it's something the county has been trying to plan for, because as you said, I mean, it was the same decision in the lower courts that the Supreme Court has upheld, so there's been some planning, but you always hope that you're going to have some opportunity to avoid, you know, a fiscal adverse decision.
Jim, we got about 40 seconds left. Any final thoughts on this?
I don't know. I would tend to still.
Are there any groups that might be helping people do the amended returns, or do they have to go to an accountant to do that? Could be expensive.
I don't know about individuals. I mean, the people who brought the case, the Wynn couple, they had paid an actual $25,000 in taxes to another state. So I would doubt that they would be getting free services to help them file an amended return. It does tend to be people who are higher income, who might have a stream from a business they own, or some kind of professional services that operate in other states.
I would suggest going to your tax preparer or an accountant.
Right, if you think that you're subject to that, for sure, check it out.
Good final word. Well, thank you for that. How are you doing, Henry Hailstock?
We're doing well.
The summertime I think of as great. It's just a wonderful time. But you're here a little bit on the dark side of the summer, and what can bring.
Excuse the pun.
Well, I mean, what's I think of the brightness of the sunshine, and when I think of robberies and home invasions, I'm not. That leaves me a little queasy.
I know. And you know, this year, 1 in 10 homes will be burglarized, and that's a statistical
That's
fact.
a summertime, 1 in 10 year-wide, or
Year-wide,
especially in the summertime?
for the whole year. It will increase during the summer because it's warm and everyone is out and everything. And this is the time where people will take vacations, and other people who want to take advantage of that know that. And be truthful, they're out canvassing now to see what homes they can possibly get into. And you have to be prepared for that and be cautious of that. And there are a number of things that you should be doing now to make sure that you're not a victim, as my parents were some time ago. And let me start from outside, okay? First of all, you know, you're approaching your home. Make sure that your shrubberies don't cover doors or windows. Keep them trimmed so that no one can be behind the shrubbery trying to get into a hidden window or a door. Also, make sure outside, we were just talking about that you have well lighting. If you don't have, the motion lights are the best to me. But if you don't, at night turn on your lights, okay? And make sure that it's well lit all around, not just having a dark spot there. The one thing, if you mentioned traveling on vacation, make sure that you have some timers that will go on and off, seemingly as though you're at home. And it would be nice if you had one of those hooked up to a radio or a TV. Don't have them all on all night, because people will realize, hey, they're out of town. The other thing people don't realize is that, you know, you need to stop your paper and stop your mail while you're away, because that's piling up, and people are aware that they look at that.
You also, this is also an opportunity to bring communities together, too, to reach out to your neighbors. And to say, look, can you come by? Can you take a look at this? Or is that something that's no longer, now that we're in these little isolated castles?
It is, you know, hopefully you will have a neighbor that you feel comfortable with, so that's the other thing, that you can give a key to. Don't put keys, you know, under the flower pot or under the mat or something like that, because it's easy. Do you know it's less than 60 seconds for a burglar to get into your home? So you have to be cautious of that, all right? The other thing is basically, you know, make sure that you have a solid door. a steel door or a wooden door with a well-installed, viable they vote lock.
Right.
Okay, a key in a knob lock is not just not due. And if your door is not fully sealed, put weather stripping around it.
What if you have the glass panels on either side of the door?
Then you
People
need
can
to
just break
kinda-
through and unlock the door?
Well,
You
that's
need,
what-
you need the deadbolt or the
key.
keyed lock, so that you need the key from the inside
can't just
and
turn
the
it.
outside.
And take it out, but make sure that key's available for you just in case, God forbid, a fire or
Right,
something
right.
like that. Because I had to fight my parents to make them realize that to take the key out of the lock and put it somewhere accessible to to them, so that they can get in and out just in case of a fire.
We've heard of stories of neighbors where particularly their backyard gate doesn't lock. And so if you don't think about locking that door, or a lot of people have easy access to some kind of a patio or some kind of a deck, that really becomes a more hidden access.
Right. In
Well,
my neighborhood,
let's talk about that. You have the sliding doors in the back or the side sometimes. Just get a simple broomstick and place in there to lock it, or as they say, a dowel.
A bar,
to
anything
put,
else,
to,
right?
to put down there to lock it. But you also need to be aware, if you have those type of sliding doors that can easily be taken off of the frame, because there are a lot of that. Just drill a hole in the sliding door and the secured frame, and put a pin in there, and that will help. But you'll be surprised how burglars can have easy access to that.
You were saying something?
well, I was going to say, in my neighborhood, most of the home break-ins come in through the door into the basement or the back door. And the basement door, a lot of times people, they're going in and out as they're doing some kind of project or something, and then so it may not get locked securely, and it's a lot more hidden, that somebody can go and no one can really see them working on that. But the other thing is,
We've got about 30 seconds, Jane.
people think that they hide things, like in their freezer, that makes it safe.
No,
No.
no. Just what you were just talking about, when you're outside working, and you might work in the front or the back, and you have the garage door open or the front door or the back door open, that's a tendency for those people going around doing solicitations to easily get in. The other thing is to make sure that when you take your car for service, you give them the car key only. Don't have your house key on the same ring and leave it there while you're waiting, because you have some unsavory characters that can make copies right then and there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things you need to be aware of.
Henry Hailstock. Perfect timing. Thank you so much for this. This is very, very helpful.
You're
Look forward to
quite
having you
welcome.
come back again.
All right.
We'll be right back after these messages. And we're back. Stuart Rosenthal, welcome back.
Thank you, Don.
When you come on, it's so enlightening. Beacon, again, we talk about this. I hope I
No
don't-
pun intended.
Yeah, but I love your publication.
Thank you, thank you.
I read it.
Me too.
avidly. Yes. All right. Now we've got a travel story we're going to get to
Okay.
towards the end. Hopefully we can squeeze it in. A couple of great health stories.
Very
about.
interesting studies that I want to talk about, yes. Clinical depression is a serious problem. They say between 6 and 7% of the population has it every year.
Didn't that sound kind of low?
Well, no.
I mean, it's a
not-
lot of people, but I'm sorry. It seems like so many
Maybe
people
there's more.
depressed.
That's a problem.
But
Part of the problem
lifetime
is.
incidence is probably higher.
Oh, yes. But
Yeah.
also the problem is people don't report it. If you're
Right.
depressed, you're not talking about it. You're not going to see a doctor, right?
Exactly.
That's part of the problem.
Exactly.
So diagnosing it is very difficult. So one of the holy grails has been to try to find a simple blood test
Right.
that can diagnose depression, and maybe they found it. Northwestern University Medical School has done some studies, a small study, but it seems to be very interesting, that there are 9 blood markers that appear to identify adult clinical depression.
Wow.
They're RNA molecules,
Right.
but genetic, right? And they can find it in the blood. So first of all, they took 32 people between 20 and 70, 20 and 80, I think, actually, who had been diagnosed with depression, and the same number who had not. And they checked their blood to see if there was any way of finding, and they found this pattern, that there are these 9 markers that seem to identify
Interesting.
depression. So then they gave the people who had depression therapy.
Right.
They gave them cognitive behavioral therapy, and those that improved with the therapy and reported that they were no longer depressed, their markers changed.
Wow.
That's interesting.
Yes, so it's the first time there's been evidence that psychotherapy actually has a physiological effect that can be determined.
I'm impressed
And
with
one that's
Northwestern.
pretty rapid because it actually
Over
has
18 months.
responded.
Over 18
right?
months, right.
I'm impressed with Northwestern because that's the same university when I talked before about they were able to identify some cancer markers
Right.
in the blood.
Right.
This is
Same-
apparently one of
same
the things
thing.
they're really working on, so
Yeah.
it's fascinating.
I'm
Now,
impressed
something
with
else very interesting. They then also found that of those who had improved and got over the depression and their markers changed, there were still 3 of the 9 markers that were the same as those who were depressed.
Okay.
Even though they were no longer depressed and the other markers had changed. Well, that suggests that maybe there are, vulnerabilities that are genetic that people have that give them a tendency towards depression. So maybe you can even find people in advance who might be having a tendency towards depression, and then you can take interventions ahead of time and prevent it from happening. So there are all kinds
And
of
is the
potentials.
idea that down the road this would be part of a routine blood test, or it would be something that you would do if there was some cause or reason to believe there was an
Yeah,
issue?
I don't know what they have planned. Right now they're going to do larger human testing to make sure that this really holds true over the large populations, but I think it's
All right,
fascinating
so we
and has
got
a lot of potential.
so depression. We're going to solve depression.
God will.
I love having you on here because
Thank
we
you.
have these stories, and I found that you're usually 3, 4, 5 months ahead of the curve with these.
We have spies everywhere.
But you get into the nuts, but it's really exciting. So,
Right.
so the next thing is on cancer.
On
right?
cancer, right? Now this is a mouse study, but it's also very interesting. So the body tends to fight off abnormal cells. So, the regular immune system gets rid of them. But when you get to the point where you actually have a tumor, where it's growing, the tumor emits a substance that tends to put the T cells and the immune cells to sleep.
Right.
And apparently that's because as the cells grow, they use up all the oxygen, and that low oxygen environment triggers the release of this hormone that gets rid of, puts to sleep the other.
Gotcha.
So someone theorized, first of all, there's a lot of study going on right now. How do you stop this from happening? But one study they just did at Northeastern University this time was to say, what if we just increase the oxygen supply in the blood?
Right.
It's a pretty simple thing to do. So they took these mice who had lung cancer, they had given them lung cancer, whatever, and they had tumors, and they put them in oxygen environments, high oxygen environments, and sure enough, the ones who were in the high oxygen environment, their tumors grew more slowly, and when they then injected them with additional immunotherapy, it was much more effective than those who were not in regular.
So they are really just pumping up the cell's own oxygen
Right.
levels.
And that is apparently stopping the tumor cells from putting the regular immune system to sleep and allowing the immune system to do its job. So that's very simple, very inexpensive, readily available. So some doctors are saying, why wait for human studies? Let's just start giving oxygen to these. It's very simple to do. But of course, they're going to be doing human studies in
Well,
that.
one
So
of
in
the
this study, were there no adverse impacts of increasing the oxygen?
there's no side effects, is my
Jane, real quick,
understanding.
we've got about 40 seconds, and I want to get to the travel story. So real
Well,
quick.
that was what I was going to add is that, so many things that they can do. They're discovering new things to do to treat cancer, but they come with side effects.
Right.
So
right. This is one that
oxygen
doesn't,
is-
and it's very inexpensive.
and expensive immunology
Right.
things right now.
Perfect, right.
Travel. I want to know
We have an
travel. If I've got cancer and I'm
Antarctic-
depressed, where can I go to?
Antarctica, if you got the money. Very expensive.
Okay.
Very complicated. And there are issues about it. It's at least $10,000 and often 20 or 30 or whatever.
So go to
But-
Antarctica, don't
but
spend money
it's
on
the
this
last
treatment.
frontier.
Right.
There's 600,000 emperor penguins.
Right.
During the season, which is November to March, it's 24 hours of daylight. It's
Right.
not exactly warm. It's very, very cold, but you can see a lot of things. There's wildlife. So it's apparently the place to go now if you got the money.
Guys, $50,000. The 5 of us can go. Let's go. Let's do Montgomery Weekend Review from Antarctica.
Oh, that sounds like a great idea.
Great idea.
Yeah.
Shirley Brandman, welcome back.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Now we are talking about a very important issue here.
We are actually. So, people have these idyllic views of summer vacation is about kicking back and lying out on the lawn, and that's terrific. But we also need to recognize that there's a very serious academic piece going on here, which is we're deeply committed to closing the achievement gap, but the research really shows us that kids do lose some of their learning over the summer.
I felt that.
Yeah?
Just sort of that receding brain
Absolutely.
We all
activity.
have.
And
We all
then,
have
and
felt
then,
that.
and then that first 2
So
weeks
some
back
of the
in school.
research shows that really in any cohort of students, if they take, for example, a standardized test at the end of the academic year, same one at the beginning of the next, they will not do as well.
Right.
And their focus is actually particularly on math skills,
was
which
gonna
some
say
of us
math,
don't
yeah. And
use
language.
as regularly.
Right.
But reading, interestingly, children who are living in disadvantaged circumstances, children growing up in poverty,
Right.
tend to lose about 2 months of reading proficiency over the summer, whereas they find that there's a difference because middle class students, upper class students, they get exposed to,
They're
they
reading.
tend to get involved in activities. They don't show the same reading learning loss over the summer. So when you think about the achievement gap, the commitment that we make during the entire academic year to get kids on track, you can't just allow the summer for kids to fall back. So this really does need to become, I think, a policy priority for us, and to
So
see the connection.
what kinds of things can, I mean, obviously, one thing that comes to mind is summer school, but that's not something, I mean,
Right.
not everybody
It's expensive.
wants to do that. Yes,
Sure.
and it's expensive. So what other things?
So some of it is just adding a literacy component on to any kinds of things that kids may be involved in, whether it's sports teams or any other kinds of activities, to just have some reading component that has some guidance to it. Because the key elements are that students should be reading at a level that's comfortable for them, not too easy, not too hard, but you also want to make sure they're actually getting comprehension. So even the easy questions of, well, tell me what that was about. What does that mean? How does that work? Any kind of guiding, prompting, doing it as part of a team, doing it as part of a group, creates that kind of feedback loop that tends to help students continue to make some progress.
I used to make my sons read the newspaper and everything, and then I started talking about it. I said, well, what was that issue about? You know, I didn't read it. Tell me something about it. And then I get them involved with it. And they thought I was really being a good dad. I was giving them comic books and everything to read. And I said, what is that junk about? You know, I said, maybe I made a mistake. And they start telling me about it, trying to get me involved.
Well, that's such an important point, because you know, you will read more if you're interested. So frankly, the kids should be interested. This
Right,
is, and the summer,
exactly.
because it's not school, because it's not a preset assignment. Read things you care about.
Yes.
You know, you love soccer. Read about soccer players.
Exactly.
You know, read about things that will capture your imagination.
Well, for me, as you're thinking about this, I had my kids, 2 boys first, were avid baseball. So I had them the box scores and tell me all about it. With the downfall of baseball, the popularity is unfortunate with this, is that that's one way that they kept their math skills.
Absolutely.
And reading the stories
Right.
and having all that. Because isn't the summertime, I mean, a key part of that, maybe this is, you know, as we're going through parental education, is to, they don't want to do it if it's a chore.
Right.
So making it fun, I mean, doing what you're talking about,
Right.
and so it is
In
fun.
fact,
They don't know that they're
the most
working.
effective programs are not recreations of more seat time in a classroom.
Right.
You know, it is an opportunity to be outdoors, to experience, to engage, but not to lose sight of the fact that there can be embedded learning that children love, because it's allowing them to follow their own passions.
What about internet games or things of that sort? Are there things that can combine reading skills?
Within balance, right? I mean, so some of it is making sure that there are definitely games that have value, and there are definitely games that can be encouraging, but there are games that can be detrimental.
Right.
And the other thing is that there is you do want to have kids moving and active and not simply sitting. And I just want to make a connection there in terms of health issues. The other thing that we don't think about often with summer is that during the school year, one of the things that schools do is that they feed kids. And so when school is out, there's definitely need to pay attention to the opportunity to have kids be able to eat. So in Montgomery County, for example, we now have about 120 sites where we feed roughly 9,000 students over the summer. They're wonderful federal programs. And if anybody has or is connected to or runs any kind of program, so if it was a literacy-based or a sports program, you can qualify for some of the
It's
feeding.
Lunch programs? Or?
They are lunch programs.
Yeah,
Yeah, they're federal
it's-
dollars that provide for, and the nutrition services of the school system is the conduit. They get the contract, and they are able to
And
work
where
with.
do they go? Schools
They'll go to
or-
community groups. They'll go to apartment houses. They'll go wherever there are programs that meet the qualification, and they'll deliver food.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually very easy, because you have to either have a program within a boundary that meets a threshold of students qualifying for the federal free and reduced meal program, or you have to, if you're not located there, then you would have to demonstrate that a certain percentage of your kids. But it's like a bag lunch, and all you need is somebody who does like a half-hour training of how to actually put bags in
Throw a
the
comic book
refrigerator.
inside, maybe. That would be
Yeah.
Check out, but you can check out some of the recreational centers
Right, they-
that have some good programs that,
Yes.
that have that
Right,
feed
that
the
are
kids.
that are taking advantage
30
of that.
seconds
Yeah.
left. Final words on how do we keep our kids moving along and not
So we all have to
receding?
pay attention to this. As parents, we want to get engaged with our kids, but frankly, at a community level, we really need to think about summer learning as a priority. It's not the extra, it's not just the vacation, it's not time off and don't pay attention. We need to see this as part of the continuum. It's an important part of closing the achievement gap, a priority for all of us.
And a priority for all of us was learning about all these stories today. What a great and educational program. And I want to thank you for being here with me. And I want to thank all of you in the viewing audience for joining us for this week's edition of Montgomery Week in Review. I'm Don Mooers, inviting you to join us next week at this very same time.